The smell of Tyburn isn't the smell of death. It's the smell of spilt ale, of sweat, and hot meat pies. It's the smell of a festival. And today, I am escorting the guest of honor to his own execution party. My name is Thomas, and this is my third escort duty. The first two were forgettable men, silent, petty thieves whose eyes were long dead before the noose could ever tighten. But today is different. Today is Jack Sheppard. It began in the damp, moldy cold of Newgate Prison, where daylight was just a weak, gray smear against the stone walls. The metallic screech of the bolt being drawn echoed down the corridor like a final judgment. I stood taller, my grip tight on my wooden staff, trying to keep my chest from heaving too obviously. I am only 19, and the uniform is still a bit too wide for my shoulders. But the meager pay keeps my mother and sisters in bread, so I've learned to swallow my fear down with my plain breakfast. Then they brought him out. Jack Sheppard. The legend of the taverns and the headache of the magistrates. He wasn't the broad-shouldered giant the stories made him out to be. He was thin, slight, weighed down by heavy chains, but his eyes were unwavering. They swept over us guards, past the jailer, and for a moment, they settled on me. There was no contempt, no fear, only a profound weariness and, perhaps, a flicker of curiosity. He offered a half-smile, as if we were all actors in a ridiculous play, and only he knew the ending. The cart was waiting at the gate, a simple wooden box on two wheels. As we pushed Sheppard onto it, the roar from the street outside hit us. It wasn't the roar of anger. It was the roar of anticipation. The procession began. The wheels groaned on the cobblestones, a mournful melody to the chaotic chorus around us. It is 2 miles from Newgate to Tyburn, but it felt like a journey through all the circles of a living hell. Faces were pressed together on both sides of the road, flushed with excitement and ale. Men bellowed obscenities. Women shrieked, some cursing, others throwing flowers. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders, eyes wide, trying to glimpse the villain of their living fairy tale. I walked beside the cart, the wood of my staff slick with sweat. My job was to keep the crowd from getting too close. But in truth, I was part of it. A cog in this grotesque machine. Were we serving justice or feeding vultures? Sheppard sat silently in the cart, his back straight, ignoring the refuse people threw at him. Occasionally, he would nod to someone in the crowd, an old acquaintance from the criminal underworld who was raising a tankard to wish him a final, smooth journey. They were even selling portraits of him along the route, cheap engravings depicting his daring escapes. They were profiting from his death, right before his eyes. As was tradition, we stopped at the Bowl Inn for the last pint. The crowd parted slightly, forming a quieter circle. The innkeeper brought out a large tankard of ale. Sheppard took it in his chained hands and drank it down in one long, deep draught. Foam clung to his lips. He handed the empty tankard back, and his eyes found mine again. He gave a slight nod. A thank you? An acknowledgement? I don't know. I only know that in that moment, he wasn't the great escapist, not a symbol. He was just a man having his last drink. I gave a small nod in return. We moved on. The air began to change. The boisterous excitement gave way to a deeper sound, a low hum, like that of a colossal beehive. And then, I saw it, at the end of the road, atop a small hill, silhouetted against the gray sky. The Tyburn tree. Its 3 stark wooden arms reached for the heavens like skeletal fingers, ready to welcome its next guest. The crowd around it was dense, a sea of humanity, silent and waiting. The roar I had heard from Newgate was just the overture. This was the true theater. The party was about to begin. The cart stopped. The sudden halt was more jarring than the noisy procession had been. We were at the foot of the gallows. Here, The crowd was no longer a collection of anonymous faces. They were right there, so close I could smell the onion on a man's breath and see the scar on a woman's cheek. They weren't roaring anymore. They were whispering, an unsettling, insect-like sound. Their eyes fixed on Jack Sheppard, as eager as children waiting for a magic trick. Two large, ununiformed men stepped forward, the hangman's assistants. They pulled Sheppard roughly from the cart. For a second, he stumbled, and I instinctively reached out to steady him. Our hands almost touched, but one of the men shoved me back. "Out of the way!" he grumbled. They led him up the creaking wooden steps. A priest followed, muttering prayers that were lost in the sea of people. All attention was on the small man ascending to meet his fate. From the high platform, he could see over the entire crowd, over the city of London that had been his playground. The executioner was waiting, a man with a blank face and hands as large and thick as slabs of meat. He worked with a cold efficiency, checking the rope, measuring its length. This was not meant to be a quick drop and a snapped neck. The rope was too short. This was to be a slow death, a gruesome dance in the air for the crowd's pleasure. Everyone knew it. It was part of the show. The magistrate read the sentence, his voice dry and monotonous. Then he turned to Sheppard. "Do you have any last words?" A hush fell. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Jack Sheppard cleared his throat. He didn't look at the magistrate or the hangman. He looked out at the crowd. "You've come to see me hang," he said, his voice surprisingly clear and far-reaching. "But look around you. You are bound by ropes tighter than this one, the ropes of poverty, the ropes of injustice. I lived free, if only for a while. Can you say the same?" A murmur went through the crowd. Some nodded. Some shouted for him to be quiet. The hangman didn't wait any longer. He slipped the noose over Sheppard's head and pulled it tight. Then, with a nod from the magistrate, he kicked the bolt. The trapdoor beneath Sheppard's feet swung open with a dry, hollow thud. His body dropped, but there was no clean snap of bone. The rope went taut, and then he began to struggle. It is a sight I will never forget. It wasn't like a fight. It was like a puppet being jerked about by a madman. His legs kicked at the air, his hands clawed, trying to tear at the invisible band that was squeezing the life from him. The crowd had let out a single cheer at first, but a silence fell as the struggle dragged on. 1 minute. 2. Sheppard's face turned red, then a deep purple. His eyes bulged, staring at nothing. I wanted to look away. God, I wanted to turn away, to be sick, to run from that place. But I couldn't. My duty was to watch. I was a king's guard, an instrument of justice. I felt my own lips moving, mouthing prayers I'd long forgotten. I wasn't praying for Sheppard's soul. I was praying for my own. After an eternity, his body went limp. A final, small convulsion, and then he was still. Jack Sheppard was dead. The silence broke. The crowd let out a collective sigh, as if they had been holding their breath with him. Then they began to talk, the noise slowly returning. They turned on their heels and started for home, discussing Sheppard's bravery, the cruelty of the law. The vendors began to pack up their stalls. I remained standing, my feet rooted to the ground. The Tyburn tree looked stark and lonely now, its shadow stretching long over the grass. The smell of ale and pies now turned my stomach. The party was over. All that was left was the emptiness and a body swaying gently in the wind. I had come here as a guard, a part of the order. But as I trudged back, leaving Tyburn behind me, I felt only like an accomplice.